Today we're going to talk about the discriminant and the quadratic formula. So remember that a quadratic function can have many different types of roots. If it looks like this, it crosses the x-axis twice, we say that it has two real roots. Remember, roots, x-intercepts, and zeros all are alluding to these points right here. Okay, the x-intercepts, the zeros, and the roots. They're all the same thing. So this one has two roots, two zeros, two x-intercepts. It could also be that it only has one root, in which it only touches the x-axis at one point, or no real roots because it doesn't touch the x-axis at all. In this case, we can say that it has imaginary roots, but we could also say no real roots. So it can have two, one, or none. Okay, so one way to figure out how many roots we have, the number of roots that we have, we use what we call the discriminant. And the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so based on, if you write your quadratic in standard form, fill in b, fill in a, fill in c, simplify that. If your answer is positive, it doesn't matter what number you have, but as long as it's positive, you're going to have two real roots. If this gives you 0, then you're going to have one real root. And if this is a negative number, it's going to have no real roots. Okay, so it's just a matter of using this formula, and let's do some examples. So we're going to find the number of roots. X squared plus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So how many roots will that have? We don't actually have to find the roots. We can just say how many there will be. So we identify the coefficients a, b, and c, 1, 4, and 3 in this case. We're going to use the discriminant. Okay, we're going to fill in for b, fill in for a, fill in for c using these numbers. So b is 4, a is 1, c is 3. 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times 1 times 3 is negative 12. 16 minus 12 is 4. Now, what's important is not that it's 4. What's important is that it's a positive 4. So it's positive. Because it is positive, there are two real roots. Be careful. If you get 4, that doesn't mean there's 4 roots. Okay? The number is meaningless. What matters is the sign. The sign is positive, so it has two real roots. Next example, x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 0. Identify a, b, and c. Plug them in. Okay? Negative 4 squared is 16. Make sure you use parentheses because when you plug in a negative, if you don't use parentheses, you could get the wrong sign over here. So always use parentheses whenever you're plugging in. In this case, we got 0. 16 minus 16 is 0. Therefore, it's only one real root. So we're going to use this right here, this information right here. If you get 0, it's one real root. Last example, a is 1, b is negative 2, c is 2. Use the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. Plug in, plug in, plug in. You get negative 4. Since, again, what is important is not the 4. What is important is the negative. Because it's negative, there are no real roots. No real roots. So that's how you use the discriminant to find the number of roots. Now we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. Okay? The quadratic formula, it solves any quadratic. Any quadratic can be solved using the quadratic formula, even if it's not factorable. Now, ideally, you would want to factor because factoring is probably quicker. Factoring using square roots, any method that we've learned, okay, that you've learned in the past is probably easier than the quadratic formula because take a look at the formula. It's a little bit, it has a lot of parts to it, okay, and it's easy to make a mistake when we plug in. But the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that divided by 2a. So if we do an example, let's say that we have x squared plus 4x plus 3. By the way, this is the same example that we did earlier. Earlier, we just found that it's going to have two real roots. We used the discriminant to say that it has two real roots. Now we're going to find out actually what those roots are. Okay, we're going to find out what those roots are. All right. Also, if you notice in the quadratic formula, the inside of the square root is the discriminant. The inside of the square root is b squared minus 4ac. The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So basically, the discriminant, what that means is that if you're taking the square root of a positive number, you're going to get two answers because when you add or subtract a positive, you get two different answers. If you get the square root of 0, if the discriminant is 0, then the square root of 0 is 0, and when you add or subtract 0, you get the same answer. You're only going to get one solution, one root. And finally, if you b squared minus 4ac, if the discriminant is negative, the square root of a negative is not real, it's imaginary. That's why we're not going to have any real roots. So that's where it comes from. So using the formula, we can identify a, b, and c. Here is the quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we plug in the numbers, we plug in our a, b, and c in the corresponding spots of the formula, and we simplify. Earlier, we did the discriminant. We did b squared minus 4ac, and we got that it was 4. Remember? We got that it was 4. So we're going to do negative 4, plus or minus, all of this is 4, divided by 2 times 1 is 2. So I recommend doing the discriminant first so that you already know how many roots to expect, and then just substitute all of that in here. That way you can save space on your paper. So then let's see, negative 4 plus or minus square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2, so we're going to have negative 4 plus or minus 2 over 2. And remember, when we have plus or minus, it has two separate answers. One of them when it's positive, the other one when it's negative. Positive and negative. Then you simplify, you get negative 1 and negative 3. Those are your two real roots that we predicted we would have with the discriminant. Next example, letter B. X squared minus 2x minus 5. Okay, that should say equals 0. So again, we're going to do the discriminant first. B squared minus 4ac. Identify your A, your B, and your C. Okay, I didn't write it down right here, but a lot of people don't really write it down. You can just look. So B is negative 2. So we put negative 2. Squared minus 4. A is 1. And then C is negative 5. So here's the discriminant. Negative 2 squared is 4. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 5 is 20. The discriminant is 24. Remember, what matters is not the number. What matters is the sign. Since the sign is positive, it's going to have two real roots. Okay, so let's do the quadratic formula now. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. We already did b squared minus 4ac. It was 24 all over 2a. So we simplify. Minus a negative is a positive. So positive 2 plus or minus square root of 24 over 2. And then the square root of 24, we're going to simplify it. Okay, we're going to simplify the square root of 24, break it down into 4 times 6. And we know that the square root of 4 is 2. So the square root of 24 is 2 square root of 6. Square root of 24 is 2 square root of 6. And now we're going to simplify. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is also 1. So we have 1 plus or minus the square root of 6. That gives us two separate answers. One of them positive, the other one is negative. Okay, let's do another example. Letter C. Okay, here's letter C. X squared minus 4x equal negative 4. The only difference with this problem is that it's not equal to 0. So we got to make it equal to 0 by adding 4 on both sides. Now that we have it in standard form equal to 0, we're going to use the quadratic formula. You can plug in all the numbers if you'd like. I like to do the discriminant on a separate spot. In this case, b squared minus 4ac, I got 0, which means that I'm going to have only one real root. So when I do negative 4 is positive 4 plus or minus. The discriminant was 0, so I put 0 right here. And then all of that over 2. And when you add or subtract 0, it doesn't really change anything, right? Adding 0, subtracting 0, it's just going to give you the same answer. It's going to give you 4 divided by 2, 4 divided by 2, 2 and 2. It's only one answer. It got repeated. It's called a double root, but it's only one root. So x equals 2 is your answer. So this is an example where you get only one root. Last example, letter D. Again, you want to make sure that it's equal to 0 and you put it in standard form. So you do minus 2x minus 2x. The negative 2x goes right here in the middle so that it's in standard form. We're going to do the discriminant first. Okay, b is negative 2. So b squared minus 4ac. A is 1, c is 2. We got that the discriminant is negative 4. So that means that there's not going to be any real solution. Okay, no real solution. If you actually wanted to find out what the imaginary solution is, then you would continue the formula. Okay, minus negative 2 is positive 2, plus or minus the square root of negative 4. Okay, the square root of negative 4 is actually 2i. And then you simplify, you're going to get x equals 1 plus or minus I. So x equals 1 plus I, x equals 1 minus I.